And with that, I will turn it over to Kyle, who will be your presenter today.
Thank you, Scott. My name is Kyle Kleist. I am the Executive Director at the Center for Independent Living for Western Wisconsin, located in Menominee, Wisconsin, about an hour straight east from Minneapolis. I am a, shall we say, older 50s Caucasian male with graying hair, gray goatee, and square rim glasses. Welcome, everybody. I am going to then now introduce my co-presenter, or our primary presenter, Bobby Craig.
Hi, I'm Bobby, Transportation Director for the Center for Independent Living. Our program, the transportation program, is called New Freedom Transportation. I am older, I guess, female, Caucasian with red hair, no facial hair. And I'll be presenting about the actual program itself. So.
All right. So let me begin. Building a volunteer driver program. So how to use volunteer drivers to meet the transportation needs of people with disabilities living in rural areas. Our answer was New Freedom Transportation. So I'll explain a little bit. What is New Freedom? So, or why was New Freedom needed? Well, one of the things we came across was a lack of affordable and accessible transportation options for people with disabilities, especially in our service area, which is predominantly rural. We had trips funded for medical, dental, even mental health counseling. So otherwise than these Medicaid funded trips, there wasn't a lot of options available for people. So why did cilw get into the transportation business? One, lack of transportation options was a major barrier for our consumers, especially those in rural areas, and our 3-year strategic plan. So during our 3-year strategic plan, which all independent living centers do, transportation became one of our main areas to address. And then we had some opportunities come our way. So what do you need to know before you begin? What is the scope of the problem? So what we did, we surveyed consumers. We wanted to know, where are you going? What are your current transportation needs? What are your barriers? And then where would you like to go? If you had transportation available, where are the places that you would like to go? And then we needed to know, who are the providers out there? So who's currently providing transportation in your area? Are they specialized medical vehicles, those that do the MA transportation, veterans programs, aging programs? And then where are all of these trips going? Are they primarily for medical? So need to do your homework is one of the biggest things that always comes up. And then collaboration is the key. Who are the players when it comes to transportation, especially in your area? You need to know who are all the providers, who are the funders as well. And then finding opportunities to collaborate. One of the things that is required, regional transportation coordination plans. So every state is required to do that. And this is an opportunity for you to be at the table to discuss the transportation needs of persons with disabilities. So one of the things we did was we invited everyone involved in transportation to the table. So we wanted to bring everybody together. Who are the funders, the providers, who are the stakeholders, and especially the consumers. Having the consumers there to have a voice as well. So out of this, one of the great things, and I wish I could have found our old logo, but we created the WWRTCC, which is the Western Wisconsin Regional Transportation Collaborating Council. We had a wonderful little logo with a sign with a road going down the middle. But one of the things that we struggled with was developing a mission. So we talked about all of the different transit dependent populations and who we needed to provide transportation to. And it was one of our key stakeholders that came up with our little mission was develop transportation options for all transit dependent persons, not just persons with disabilities. Look at the needs of older adults. Look at the needs of low income persons as well. All of those individuals in your service area that we consider to be transit dependent. In other words, not having access of their own to transportation. And then what we did was we invited everyone to a transportation summit that we hosted at UW Stout, a college in our area. And it was a great summit. We really were able to address a lot of the barriers that existed with transportation, and then really come up with some really good ideas on how to meet the gaps in transportation. And then you need to keep the momentum going. So working with your partners to advocate for increased state funding is one of the big ones. There are a lot of other agencies out there that struggle with transportation, just like independent living centers, and bringing everyone together in a coordinated advocacy effort, especially on the statewide level, is key. Bringing all the partners together. And then again, those regional coordination plans. Every state requires them. We have them on a regional basis, operated through our transportation coordinating councils. But again, it provides an opportunity. Bobby has always been at the table with these regional plans. And then working with other independent living centers. So one of the key things that is great is we have 8 independent living centers here in Wisconsin. And currently we are working with 3 of our 8 centers here. So because there is strength in numbers. So the independent living centers working together. When we started our program, it began really with a small grant that we had received from the St. Croix County Office on Aging. So in Wisconsin, we call it our 8521 program. Every state has a different name for it, but it's that pool of money that goes to the counties for providing in Wisconsin what they refer to as elderly and disabled transportation. So they had some money left over and were looking to meet the transportation needs of people living in predominantly rural areas. Then we had the St. Croix Valley Disability Coalition, which was able to get some United Way funding. So United Way, we rely a lot on our grant foundations here. United Way was a great starting block. It allowed us to start with, initially it was a voucher program. So vouchers are a little bit different than volunteer drivers in that the individual needs to find their own transportation, and then the individual giving them a ride can get reimbursed for that trip. Using the volunteer drivers, we take that out, so we're able to provide the trip and the ride ourselves. And then the Center for Independent Living took over doing a lot of the payroll, doing the reimbursement for drivers. We started shifting to a larger volunteer driver program in our 10 counties. So Bobby will talk a lot about the volunteer drivers and need to recruit them. And then how the program expanded. So we got some foundation grants. We're lucky to have 2 large philanthropic foundations. One is the Bremer, or BREMER, and then the Anderson Foundation, which is connected with Anderson Windows. And then we had reached the point where our program was large enough to where we were able to receive the 5310 transportation dollars. So when the surface transportation bill was reauthorized and developed the 5310 program for rural transportation, we were able to apply for those that funding And then from there, the program really took off. So how the program expanded, initially we were in our 10 counties, and then we started working with North Country Independent Living Center. So they are the independent living center directly to the north of us, connected with Lake Superior and then coming down to our 10 counties. So now we're operating in 18 counties. And from there, we started to contract with other counties, similar to what we had done with St. Croix County, that had their 8521 program, and essentially word spread. So here we have this independent living center that has this volunteer driver program. And so the counties started to come to us and asking us to contract to provide the services really in the rural areas that they weren't able to provide those trips. So once again, we were able to tap into that county funding as the program began to expand. So any questions at this time that people might have? I will stop sharing my screen for a minute. I've kind of covered a little bit with the beginning.
And just remember, if you have a question, you can select the raise hand or *9, or you can drop them in the Q&A box.
My takeaway from all of this to really emphasize is one, working with all of your partners. Collaboration is one of the biggest keys, but then looking for opportunities, grant funding, foundations, counties, other ones. Bobby will go into a lot more detail, but currently here in Wisconsin, we contract with managed care organizations and the IRIS program, which is a self-directed Medicaid program.
And there is one in the Q&A box now.
All right. So, was there a need to address accessible vehicles for providing transportation? Very good question. Yes, there was. So here is one of the major issues. When you have volunteer drivers, not many of them have access to a lift-equipped vehicle. So we were able to get some foundation dollars to purchase a lift-equipped vehicle. Not only did we go with a lift-equipped vehicle, but we went with a lift-equipped vehicle with a 42-inch ramp and a heavy-duty suspension system, rear suspension, so that our vans are able to accommodate people in oversized or bariatric wheelchairs as well, because we saw that as one of the needs. Some programs only take you to medical appointments. What about leisure activities? Great question. So when we began, it was not about medical. It was about social, recreational. We provide trips of all kinds. Bobby can go into a little bit more detail on that, but no, it was not just about medical. One of the things we wanted to ensure was that people had access to do social, recreational, grocery shopping, you name it. We wanted to open it up to what the people's needs were. So great question. Yes, we've always gone beyond medical. The only time we had to go to stop that was during the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit, we began losing some volunteer drivers and had to go to just life essential trips, which was medical, nutrition, and employment. But I'm happy to say we have now expanded and have opened it back up for all of our trips. So when working with COA, do you reimburse them for the trip, and are the riders considered a consumer under the CIL? Good question. We do not open people in our transportation program as a consumer. Transportation operates a little bit different outside of our regular consumer services. And it would be difficult to open every one of those riders as a consumer, develop a goal sheet, and all of those that go along with being an open cell consumer. The other one, what are your hours of operation? It varies. We have all kinds of trips, early morning, late evening. We try to keep it within hours of operation for our drivers, but I'll let Bobby go a little bit more answering that question. So if you want to, Bobby.
Okay, I'm sorry, could she repeat the question? I had something pop up on my screen trying to close it out.
It was, what are our hours of operation?
Oh, okay, we have different hours. Our actual office hours are 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. Our drivers, though, they drive 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So every day of the year, even Christmas, Thanksgiving, all holidays. So.
Do you also encourage the rider for medical to use DHS or other medical transportation first? Yes. So one of the things is we do not compete with, if there is federal funding being provided, we don't compete with that. So to give you an example, if it was a city that had a paratransit service, we would not operate in that area. If there was a smaller community that had a federally funded shared ride program, we don't overlap or duplicate services. That's one of the things that really came out when we were doing our transportation summit, was the amount of duplication that went on. You could have vehicles following each other down the road, all going to the same place. So we made sure the fact that we weren't duplicating any services. So if a person is eligible for a Medicaid trip, they usually will go through our Medicaid broker here in Wisconsin. Do you have a memo of understanding between? Yes. So we do a number of MOUs and a number of contracts as well with both the counties, the managed care organizations, the independent living centers. So Bobby coordinates so many contracts, I don't know if she can keep track of them half the time. Were most of the people providing transportation clients or others? No, so they are not direct consumers of ours. Generally, they get referred. A lot of the counties, managed care organizations, whoever the funder is, are generally the ones that are calling to book the ride. And can you provide MOU template? Sure. I can have Bobby provide a template at the end of the training to send it out to individuals of some of the MOUs that we've done or contracts in the past. She'll have to clean and sanitize them to make sure they don't contain any confidential information. But otherwise, we would be happy to share that. So at this point, I am going to turn it over, start sharing my screen again, and turn it over to Bobby to continue our presentation.
You can just let me know when you're ready, Kyle.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Okay, so I'm Bobby, the Director of Transportation. And so the first one is, how is the program funded? I end up writing the New Freedom Grant for the 5310 funding. And then we also have 8521 contracts with different counties. I think right now we actually are contracted with 3, maybe 4 counties for their 8521 money. And it disappeared, Kyle.
Sorry
There we
about
go.
that.
That's okay. So we have 5 because we work with the ADRCs. I also write community foundation grants. We just maybe 2 months ago, got the Hometown Health Grant through Mayo. I also write in for the Otto Bremer Foundation, the Hugh Anderson Foundation, which Kyle mentioned earlier. The two foundations, the Otto Bremer Foundation and the Hugh Anderson Foundation, we actually purchased our vans with the money from those two. So there should be one more slide. Does it list other fundings? During the pandemic too, they also came out with other just money and grants that you could fill out. And so I filled out all of those. They're like each for $5,000. We do managed care organizations. We are contracted with Inclusive, Lakeland, and CWI, which is my choice. We do the IRIS program and the Department of Workforce Development and the Recovery Wellness Consortium. And what that is here, it used to be WRRWC, and now it's just RWC. We do crisis rides 24 hours a day. We provide crisis rides to stabilization homes. That way, if they're in a safe place, they're not having to go to jail. They're not having to go or stay in a position where they feel unsafe. So they will go to their local hospital or even to the sheriff's office or the police station. And our drivers who are trained for crisis rides will go pick them up and transport them to either the safe home in Chippewa or the safe home in Eau Claire. So next, how the program works. Your traditional volunteer driver program, obviously we recruit everywhere. We recruit in every county. Recruiting is almost like 24 hours a day. For me, if I'm talking to someone, I will bring it up. Like, hey, do you know anybody? Or if you would like to if you have time to give rides or their friends maybe. So just word of mouth. We asked a little bit for recruiting, but I found out that since most of our drivers are older, they're not on the computer or Facebook or any of that. It's easier for them if I go out and hang signs like at Quick Trip, or if there's people who gathered to do the old car shows, I put them there. So the older population is more into going face to face. We do reimburse our drivers at the federal rate. Right now it is 56 cents per mile. One of the things I found the best that works is the tear off sheets. It talks about how much they're reimbursed and then they just tear off the phone number. Those are very good at Quick Trip and other places where there's always a crowd. They just can pull the number off and go and call us when they have time. Next. Okay. The digital headlines in the senior center paper. Those are where they work. They're very nice. What you can do is go online if you get the senior paper. And when you click on the headline, it will take you right to our webpage, which allows them to read about us. Actually, all of our programs within our service, within the center, it'll tell you about that. And they can fill out the application on our webpage. We also do letters sent to churches, to veterans. Go back, thank you. To the legions. And like I said earlier, any place where there's a crowd, even at the VAs, if you go into the driver's lounge, you hang them there. We share drivers. If there's somebody who has a program, for example, like Chippewa has a veterans bus that goes to the VAs. And we will work with them. If they have only one person going, we'll take them. If their bus isn't full, they'll take ours, so we collaborate with them. And they also help us recruit. So we have drivers that we ask if you want to drive for other programs so that you can be driving for more than one program. Go ahead, Kyle, next. Okay, then we have a regional driver training. So when I recruit a driver, he goes through a couple of trainings. We do 3 background checks on him or her. And then I train them to locally drive for us. Of all the rules, they get a manual, what can and can't be done, and how they do their logs, what their responsibilities are. everything like that. Then once a year, I have a regional driver training that drivers can come from all over the state and attend the driver training. We just had it. We were limited to the amount of drivers because of the pandemic. So we had 70, I think it was 75 to 80 drivers. Kyle, do you want to read the question and I answer it now, or do you want me to answer them at the end?
So one of the questions here is, how does the funding for transportation for employment work? Does VR pay for rides?
It's what?
Does vocational rehabilitation pay for rides?
Yes. Okay, so for employment, we actually only do employment. We use New Freedom funding and we have used DVR and we've used some IRIS, but it's only good for 30 days. We provide the transportation for 30 days. And then at the end of the 30 days, they should have found someone that they could maybe ride with, or they worked long enough to save for a down payment on a car, but we only provide for 30 days. Unless we are with inclusive, which very, very, very seldom would approve of an employment ride. But we do have some agencies that we can work with and go a little longer, but normally is 30 days. And I seen a question about insurance, because that's always, but I don't see it now.
It's in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Are there any insurance liability considerations taken before taking on individuals?
Okay.
Someone's asking about a background check.
All right, I can answer both. So background checks, there's 3 of them. We do the Wisconsin Circuit Court. We also do the Family Watchdog for sexual predators. And then we do what I call a bid. It's actually for personal care workers that do a thorough background check on them. So if at any time, because we receive TOT money, if they have any violent crimes or like money crimes and violence against elderly or DUIs anytime, doesn't matter if they were 17 or they were 20 and they're 50 now, they cannot drive for us. DOT does not allow that.
And we do require all of our drivers to have insurance as well.
Yep.
And we do have an umbrella policy as well for our center that is, we're able to cover our drivers as well.
Right. So that's where I was going to next. So they carry their own insurance. And like Kyle said, we do have an umbrella. The problem with that is when they go to their insurance company and they say, oh, I'm volunteer driving, then the insurance company wants to treat them as if they're a taxi cab or like a Uber or something like that. However, that is not what they are. Volunteer drivers are like if your neighbor came to pick you up and take you to the doctor. We are, along with GWAR, working on legislation to make sure that that can't happen to volunteer drivers. There is a list of drivers and insurance companies that will not charge you for being a volunteer driver. And when a driver calls me and says, hey, my insurance company says this, then I send them the letter from the Wisconsin Insurance and they present that to their insurance companies because they're not cabs and they're not Ubers. So to list them again, the 3 backgrounds is we do the Wisconsin Circuit Court. We do what's called Family Watchdog. And those 2 are free on the internet. Then the bid, which is the background they use, I guess Human Services uses it. That costs $7 to $10 to do a thorough background, a caregiver's background check on them. So everything shows up. Okay, so if you want to go back 1 slide there, the regional driver training, like you said, we just had, there was 75 to 80 drivers from other programs and our program. That day, no one gets appointed a ride. Everybody knows that they have other transportation providers that day. We train them. They have an appreciation lunch. This time they were trained on HIPAA and dementia. They're always required. And so is the bloodborne pathogens. Those are required to do each year. Then we also did a mental health part of it. We did a companion dog and wow, I'm trying to think what else. So, but it's all day long, but we kind of mix it with fun. They get their training so that they're only pulled off the road that day. You're not pulling drivers off like, oh, hey, it's this time for your HIPAA training and a month later for your dementia. So we do it all in one day. And they have a good time meeting other drivers. And they also meet their dispatchers probably for the first time, some of them, because otherwise they just meet their dispatcher on the phone. See, do the drivers also receive a disability awareness training? Yep, it changes every year on what I add besides the HIPAA and dementia. So this was just what was for this year. We've had different disabilities, like an expert trains and comes in. We've done adaptive equipment. We've done sensitivity. Those so far I can think of in the past, but we do a lot of training on different disabilities. So. Right, the next slide. This is individual training, driver training. This is what they receive before they attend the original. They're given the manual and I meet with them for about an hour and a half and with any other questions that they may have. They're trained on our mission statement and what that is, who we are, what we believe, how their role as a volunteer driver is vital. They have to fill out logs. Logs are actual legal documents. So they have to know how to fill them out. They can't be full of mistakes or corrections or any of that. They have to be correct because they go to a support person and she matches that with Google. So they are taught about confidentiality, alcohol and drugs. And when I say this, it's for both sides, as a driver and what could be expected from the rider. The rider also has a list that they have to fill out about confidentiality, about the alcohol and drugs and eating in the car and drinking and the seatbelt. Their social media and the sexual harassment. We keep up on that. They are trained on sexual harassment as far as riders harassing them or staff in the office or vice versa, them doing that. So they are trained on quite a bit that day. Next, Kyle. Collaboration and sharing resources with other agencies, committees, and boards. I think that the secret to a successful transportation is just collaborating with everybody around you. We are all heading for the same goal. And we all have some money, but if we all work together, that money goes twice as far to make sure that everybody has and can get a ride. Some of the committees I work for, I'm vice president for WAM, which is the Wisconsin Association of Mobility Managers. I also chair Willing, and Willing is Wisconsin Independent Living Network, and I am the chair for the transportation part. I also sit on transit commissions, St. Croix, the transit coordinating committees, also in Dunn County, Barron County. I attend, as Kyle had said to you about the rural planning, I think last year I attended over 20, or the year before the pandemic, so it's even been longer than that. I am present at every one so that I can say, this is what we could do to help. And we're part of their plan, their 5-year plan. So what are the barriers? The barriers are everything that makes the program good. I have to say that is the recruitment of drivers, especially now during a pandemic, is very hard. I was out recruiting still, but people are scared. They don't want to get it and bring it home to their family. Some of them have partners too that are really at risk for getting it, that type of thing. There are drivers who don't want to wear the mask, but we require that, so they're not driving for us till we don't require that anymore. So the other part is the financial stability. Yes, we all write grants, but yes, there's more people applying for the same pot of money. So it's becoming very aggressive type to apply for a grant. There's state funding, everything like that. The insurance laws for volunteer drivers that we talked about a few minutes ago. We are working, and I am sorry because I'm trying to remember the name of the bill, and Kyle knows it because Kyle's working on it, for them to ask legislators and to support the increased volunteer driver reimbursement rate to match the federal rate. And when the bill first came out, and Kyle, if you remember, you guys are working on this to get it changed because it said 20 something cents and it needs to be changed to be the current federal rate.
Yes, I always encourage people it's called the Volunteer Driver Tax Appreciation Act, which would change the IRS reimbursement rate, which is currently 13 cents a mile for volunteer drivers, to match the federal rate. And the only reason that this exists is because when the law was written for volunteer driver for the reimbursement rate, it was 13 cents a mile, but they never included that it should increase as the federal rate increases. So this is a little known piece of legislation that was introduced by two congressmen from Minnesota, and I am trying to get momentum for this.
So how effective has the program been? So if you build it, they will come, and that happened. We increased by the year. Last year during the pandemic, we still did, and just doing doctor to medical appointments, we still did over 30,000 rides. We normally, when there's no pandemic, we can go anywhere from 60 to 85,000 rides in a year. Is it difficult to keep up with the increased need as people learned about the program? Yes. When this program started, I was one of the dispatchers, and now we have 6 dispatchers, and we have a support person that's all she does is keep track of the logs. She processes about 3,000 logs per month on an average basis. A lot of times it's more, but that's what her average is. Finding additional funding has been the biggest hurdle to overcome for this program. Do you limit the amount of miles per ride? Example, 100 miles per month. We do not. They can go wherever they like. We are one of the programs that can cross state lines. We're in Wisconsin. We go to Minnesota all the time. We go up into Michigan. We cover, like I said, all of that. We've also been out to South Dakota. So there's no limit. The only limit that we have is that a driver has to be within 45 minutes of the rider, or 45 miles, I'm sorry, of the rider to be able to pick them up. When you get up into the rural areas of our program, up in like Forest, Florence, Wood, Oneida, up in those, right on the Michigan border, it's 65 miles that a driver can drive to pick up a rider. So there are no limits as to where they can go or how many miles. We do with some of our contracts, if the ride is over 100 miles, the dispatcher does have to call that program and get approval for that trip. But most of them let it happen. They agree to do the funding for that. We do check if someone needs, like the lady who went to South Dakota, the reason that she had to go there because it was the closest doctor to do the procedure for what she needed. So when they get that high, we do make sure that they can't get the service nearby.
Sierra, I believe we're coming close to the end of our time. And I know that there was a couple questions yet.
Okay.
But Bobby, you just wanted to go over the numbers quick?
Okay, I'll go quick. So you see in 2005, we did 512 rides. In 2020, we did 21,520. You see the trip and the difference in the cost that went out. Since we started, the medical rides have increased by 200%, social increased by 88, education training 74%, independent living increased by 55, employment increased by 125%, nutrition increased by 36, no-shows and cancellations dropped by 8%. Next slide. This is a 4-year average. What we've learned, volunteer drivers and vouchers are a great resource to meet the transportation needs of persons with disabilities living in rural areas. When used in coordination with other transportation program, it can provide a level of transportation where no other options exist. So, do you have questions that I can answer real fast, or?
Well, one of the questions was, I see somebody had, you mentioned dispatchers, are they volunteer or paid? Those
They are
paid
paid.
staff. Yep.
Yep,
All of our
they are paid
dispatchers,
staff.
we currently have 3 or 4 and are actually looking to hire 2 more.
Correct.
Yes, so our transportation is one of our largest growing programs here at the center.
Okay, will the driver's miles begin? They begin the moment that he gets in his car and backs out of the driveway. So they get paid from the time they leave their driveway till they are back in the driveway. We still have 15 minutes, Kyle.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, maybe we don't. Okay.
I see one of the other questions was on disability awareness. Yes, one of the things that we've always done with the driver training is disability awareness. And I've enjoyed the fact that myself as an individual with a disability has been able to do that awareness training in the past. But we have staff from our center that do that on a regular basis so that drivers do get that disability awareness training as part of their.
Let's see, do you have self-drivers that, yes. So the ones that are self-drivers, that's what our voucher program can be for also. If they don't have the money for gas, what they do is I send them a form, they submit where they're gonna go for a month and how much it costs. And then we will reimburse them half of that. And that's the same way with the voucher program. If they have their own driver and their own car, we take the miles and mileage for that whole month and we split it in half and we give them a check for that to help out. Any other questions?
There's one more that popped into the Q&A box.
Okay.
Have your driver/dispatcher experienced language barriers when it comes to call-in from passengers?
Yes, we have. We have a rider who only speaks Spanish. And so we've had difficulty. She speaks broken English. And so we tried to talk to her. We did have a Spanish speaking dispatcher who would talk to her and take care of her. She is now gone, but there is a phone number where we can call and we can get an interpreter that will listen and interpret her to us. So. How can I find a similar program in my area? I'm sorry, Grace, but sometimes there's areas that service, but you could look for your ADRC or your independent living center, and they could tell you where you could find something like that.
One of the issues that we've always found is states being able to keep up on all the transportation services that are being provided. Wisconsin at one time has tried to keep an ongoing directory of all of the transportation programs, but it got to the point where they come and go sometimes frequently that it's hard to keep an updated list, especially of what trips they provide, what are their rates, what are their hours of operation. That seems to be an ongoing thing. So really having access to know what resources are available for transportation in your area could be a barrier for people as well.
Correct. Usually our staff for transportation, we are the ones who work on that manual that tells everybody and calling and finding how much they charge. At some point that will be put on our webpage so that people can go there and look to see who is providing in our Western region here, who provides what type of transportation they provide and what the costs are. But it is very time consuming because they change all of the time.
We have one person with their hand up as well. I've allowed you to talk. It's April 2021 if you want to unmute. Oh, they put their hand
I'm
down.
sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button.
You're fine.
First, so how are the volunteers given a stipend, or are they paid? How does that work a little bit more? Somehow that didn't sink in. And do you folks train other folks in other states on how to do this?
Okay, so they are paid or reimbursed because they're not employees, they are volunteers. They're reimbursed 56 cents a mile. They do the legal documentation with the log, and so they're reimbursed.
Simply at the federal rate, and there's
Correct.
no stipend. They're not given a stipend or anything on top of that.
No, they're not. No.
Okay,
Okay,
and-
and then, yes, I travel to other areas to train, to teach them about this. I was out in Breckenridge, Colorado. I got calls from Alaska, so I do go and show people how to start this program and that type of thing. Yes.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. I'm in North Carolina, and we have a lot of rural. This seems like a really good program. We have a lot of rural areas and not a lot of solutions.
Right. The New Freedom Program is actually a model program, and we are the largest volunteer program in the country right now.
Okay, well, it's wonderful what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It
We
took
right
us-
now have 160 volunteer drivers, but we're always recruiting. So,
It doesn't come easy. Let me tell you, it's been 20 years of doing this and growing slowly, starting from 4 counties to 10 counties to 18 counties. Now we're actually in 42 counties, so working with our other independent living centers. So our program is operating in over half the state of Wisconsin right now. So it's a major achievement. We are currently looking to contract with our Medicaid, our new Medicaid broker. Though there are some additional hurdles we'll have to overcome. One of them would be random drug testing is something that we currently don't do, but would need to include. So expansion is always on our mind. We're actually looking at one point, we have another independent living center that wants us to move into their service area, but we found that slow and steady is the way to go. Because especially recruiting volunteer drivers, as Bobby has pointed out, can be difficult. So you need to have the capacity with the drivers to be able to provide the service.
yes, you do. And I have to say, we have some excellent drivers. They are so committed. They go way above and beyond what they need to do as volunteer drivers. During the pandemic, the elderly were I lost the word, but anyway, so Chippewa County called and asked if some of our drivers could pick up groceries and take them to the vulnerable people who were quarantined at home. And so, of course, some of our drivers volunteered and they're still picking up their groceries and delivering it to their homes. So, and this normally is not allowed for the 5310 money because we don't haul packages, we haul people. But during the pandemic, we are allowed to do that. So, nope, there is no requirement for their vehicles except that they need to be safe. Like the tires are safe, air conditioning, heating, windshield wipers, lights, all of that it's in safe condition, and then they can drive. So we do look at that before. Kyle mentioned the contract with the new NEMT, and that's one of them. They will inspect the cars also.
So I'd like to make the point too that every state receives the federal 5310 money. It's all about how your state is using that money a lot of times, where you really want to have some input.
Yeah.
I always get a kick out of when I talk with Billy from April, who likes to point out to me that in Arkansas, they like to use that money just for vehicles. So really, it's working with your state. We are the largest recipient, our program is, of that 5310 federal money that comes through the state of Wisconsin. So it's always a great opportunity to advocate for where that $5310 are going, and that they can support programs similar to what we've developed.
There is a question, do any of the drivers assist in the store with the client? They do not. Because of liability today, our drivers don't touch them. They don't carry their bags. They have to be ambulatory to get in and out of the car. The driver doesn't even knock on the door. He calls inside and they come out. But that's due to liability, which is really sad because it's hard for some of our drivers just to watch people struggle a little bit to carry everything. But they do not go inside the store. It's just to drive them and take them there. Any other questions? Because this question is still up, but we answered that about the volunteers stuff.
And I see in the chat, there was a comment of, is there a way that you could share more or get a copy of this? And so I'm assuming you're talking about the recording and any references to resources they mentioned. It will be on the April conference website. The recording will be added there this evening, so you can go back and see this again. And then their resources they've mentioned or either shared today are also there or will be there.
And there is another question, is there a liability to CIL at all? Nope, there's none right now. Like I said, we do have an umbrella policy. If something happens and up to the limit of their insurance policy, then ours kicks in. But they sign a waiver releasing CIL of any liability.
And I see we have a question of, can a caregiver ride with a participant?
Yes, they can. A rider is always allowed to bring a caretaker, one person with them at no charge.
And then we do have one hand up. Okay, you can go ahead, April 21.
This is Pat again. I used to give a lot of folks a ride. I'm a pretty big community volunteer. And then one day a friend of mine told me that she was scared literally to death. In a way, she does it. Well, she doesn't volunteer, but she takes clients' place to doctors as part of her job. But I got to thinking about the liabilities. There are a lot of substance use problems in our area now, and a lot of people that need rides would be from this population. And it came to light that a lot of them that we were giving rides to and stuff had drugs with them when we were giving them rides. And if you went through a road check or got pulled over, how would you handle that? Because they're going to dump it under your seat. And if they don't admit, or in the car somewhere, if they see you're coming up on the cops, and then if you're the owner of the car, you're the one going to be charged, I guess, unless somebody else says it's mine. So how are you handling this sort of thing?
Well, a couple of ways. Most of our rides, I shouldn't say most, a lot of our rides come through inclusive for people who are already going through recovery and that type of thing. And they've already been checked out and deemed safe before they ever get into one of our cars. So,
But
so
you
that's
bring
one
up,
way. We have never had that incident, knock on wood, but usually our riders are checked out and deemed safe before we're ever giving them a ride.
Thank you, because I will say that, since I give a lot less people rides these days than I used to for that reason, because if you don't know them that well, but you know that there's a little history there, it makes you a little reluctant. I mean, and that's sad, but that's the state we're living in right now.
And you're correct. Our rides are mostly in rural areas our money is ear tag for elderly and disabled, and most of our rides are in the rural areas to the elderly. And so that is not a big issue, but I could see how in a big city that would be a big issue, very big. So.
Well, I serve on a board. We serve, it's going to be, right now it's 22 counties, but we're combining with another county, and it's halfway other counties. We're going to have 31 counties. It's an MCO across the state, and it's mental health, substance use, and IDD populations. So one of the populations that needs rides the most would be the folks that have had substance use issues. And that I would be, and of course the elderly, and I do some volunteer work and stuff with the veterans too, but this is the particular group, and the furthest, and the most rural is 31 counties in our state of 100, and many of them are rural counties that really need help, but it's really kind of tricky when you're putting them in your car and they may have something on them, and you may be risking your freedom.
Correct. That's true.
Well-
And our crisis rides deal with people with mental health and addiction problems too. And the drivers get extra training. Not everybody can drive for that program. They get extra training on how to be safe and to remember that they're not a psychologist. They are to put that person in their car and get them straight to the crisis house. So they've had extra training to be able to deal with that. Most of those are men. So I could see where you would be a little nervous being a female you're not sure who you're picking up. So,
So I see we're just about done, but we've included our contact information at the end. Anybody that would want to reach out to us to learn more about how we've set this up or anything else, we would be happy to share information with any other independent living center that's out there and wanting to set up a similar program, because it's all about meeting the needs of our consumers.
Thank you both for presenting today. This program is so wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Scott, thank you for moderating. And please, if you'll see in the chat, we did drop the survey link in there if you'd like to go there and complete that. Thank you so much. And we hope to see y'all in a little bit for our next session in 30 minutes.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.